all business today here at the SpringBlake College Football Show. It is a massive Week 7 slate that we are heading into. We have got a 3-show week, and you're saying, hey, it's Thursday, Blake. What are we doing? Where's the third show coming? Well, obviously Friday. We're going to record back-to-back days because there is too much for us to get into. I am charged up right now. If you can watch on the YouTube, I am slurping down a nice venti apple crisp oat milk shaken espresso, just brought back by Starbucks this morning. I am jittery. I am fired up. And I'm ready to start breaking down some of these games. This is the SpringBlake College Football Show, your favorite ball knowers' favorite ball knowing show. Today is Thursday, October 9th. Had to look to the side for that. If you are watching us here on YouTube, first of all, thank you for doing so. If it's your first time, like that video. Subscribe to the channel. Share a little bit of support for this show. Anything you give to me, I try to give back to you in tenfold worth of content. So again, like, subscribe to the channel, comment. What's your favorite game of the week? What is your favorite lock of the week? Let me know in the comment section. If you are listening, Spotify, Apple, I still love you. I'm glad you guys are there. I wish you were on the YouTube. I'm glad you're still giving us a listen. Make sure to leave a 5-star review, subscribe to the channel. Again, any support you guys give me just fuels the fire here for me to want to do more for this show. Outside of supporting this show by just watching or listening, please head over to my socials. That is at SpringBlake CFB. That is all of TikTok and Twitter, where you find a lot of stuff from this show, stuff that goes beyond this show, and a little insight onto the crazy world that is my life. Okay, today's massive preview show. We are going to release the Week 7 SpringBlake Sweet 16, which if you are new here, it is my top 16 teams in the nation, power rating, not resume ranking. We're going to list that one out. A lot of major shakeups between the last week. We are going to preview, three of the massive games this weekend. We're going to finish the other 3 on Friday's show, and we're going to have a hell of a lot of fun while we're doing it, not to mention, and maybe I have to scrap this part out, we're going to try a little bit of a new segment. We're going to try a little new segment on this show about halfway through, see how it goes, and if it doesn't exist, just ignore that part. But if it does, maybe we can enjoy it and add something new to this show on a weekly basis. Okay, so, ton of huge games, ton to get into. There are some real intriguing storylines heading into this year's Red River Shootout. And yes, that is the Red River Shootout. It is not the Red River rivalry. We are not pansies here, or I'm trying to think if there's anybody that wouldn't want me to say the word pussies on this show, but we are not pansies here. It's the Red River Shootout. We don't go woke and call it the rivalry. It's a shootout. That's what they've called it since the dawn of time. That's what it still is to this day. Plenty of storylines in this game. You've got Texas facing its potential downfall. You've got Oklahoma potentially getting its star player and Heisman caliber quarterback 17 days after having surgery on a broken bone in his throwing hand. And on top of that, you also just have one of the greatest games we get in this sport, one of the best environments. So much to talk about, so much to get into. So let's just rip the lid off on this game. It cannot be stated enough how different this game is going to be based on the availability of John Mateer. Now, no shit, Blake, that really good player, you want him out on the field for Oklahoma? Yes, but let's talk about why. Right now, Mateer, as we're taping this on Thursday, is listed as questionable on the SEC availability report. Oklahoma has also been practicing indoors all week to create deception, not kind of let everybody know what's going on in practice. And it truly would be an insane turnaround for a player who thought he would be out for at least a month. This was minimum 30 days. If he comes back for this game on Saturday, as I mentioned, 17 days after having surgery on a broken bone in his thumb. Shout out to Dr. Shin, who got on the message boards and said that he's going to be back quick. And boy, oh boy, it would be such a revelation for the Sooners here. Mateer is one of the few guys in this sport that is his team's identity. Some teams are physical. Some teams are fast. Oklahoma goes beyond John Mateer. There's a roster of 90-plus guys, 22 starters. They've got a great defensive front seven, a really good head coach, some nice coordinators to go with it. but their identity is John Mateer. If he is playing, the team will have a chance to win the game no matter the opponent. Which is why it is so massive for this game against Texas, because the Texas defense will shut this group down offensively if Mateer is not out there. And take a second to separate the Florida result, because we just watched Texas defense for the first time all year kind of get lit up a little bit. But Florida had everything going their way, fresh off the bye week, getting their star wide receiver back, and they're already a team that has a little bit of everything. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. Jaden Baugh is one of the best running backs in the game. Wide receivers, the return of Dallas Wilson, as I mentioned, was pivotal. And all of that made DJ Lagway more comfortable and more capable of being the player he is supposed to be. So I don't look at that game and say, man, Texas defense is falling apart. No, it faced an offense that had a lot of things going right for them in that game. Oklahoma has gotten zero, zilch, nothing, nada from its running backs, despite having a stable of guys that should be productive no matter how many carries they get per game. Their offensive line is still a little bit flimsy, and you saw that even when Mateer was out there as their quarterback, and the passing game just won't exist without Mateer in. You know, he creates so much offensively for this team. Michael Hawkins isn't awful, you know, if he's in. He has starting experience. He played the game last week against Kent State. Sure, they put up a lot of points. If you watch the game and you watch the highlights, there's not many of them coming from the backup quarterback, the guy who is in now and would be there if Mateer can't make it. They will not be able to move the football at all, or as easily as they did in the first month of the regular season if Mateer is not under center. It is obviously the story, but it changes things so much for the Sooners. And all that said, that might not even be to the demise of Oklahoma. Because if Oklahoma's offense isn't moving the ball up and down the field, their defense should still be able to keep them in this game and not be terrified at all about Texas rolling into town and putting up 34 points like they did last year. Texas has a huge identity issue right now and has been unwilling to move off of it. Too many long developing plays. Too much reliance on the ground game that is non-existent, and the coddling of its talented but shaky quarterback. I get why Sark has this approach, but we've seen against FBS opponents twice now, Ohio State and Florida, what they are doing and how they are operating is not going to lead to any success on that side of the ball. And Texas's offensive line was really bad in that game against Florida. They struggled against Ohio State. They haven't been great all season. They're allowing sacks on 5.77% of dropbacks. One of the, I think it's middle of the pack, maybe toward the lower half in college football. And then Oklahoma's defensive front is better than anybody in this sport at getting to the quarterback. Their sack rate is 16.26%. Number one in the country. Think about that. 16% of dropbacks, they're getting to the quarterback and sacking him. That's not even just a pressure rate. That is sacks. That high of a clip, even through 5 weeks, is remarkable. You know, I've never thought that the Oklahoma secondary is like this out of this world, very capable lockdown unit. And they have allowed some explosive plays through the air, but Texas just doesn't have the juice like that that they had in seasons past to make me fear it's going to sway the outcome of this game. You know, this year, Texas has hit on 4 plays of 40-plus yards. Last year at this time, you could have told me that was maybe double that. They were one of the, high-octane offenses in this sport. It's been the complete opposite. And Oklahoma, despite, like I said, allowing some shots, and I think 20-yard-plus plays, it's a significant number. But when you're talking about like 40-plus plays, that number drops down to 3. I just don't see this being the day where Texas dials it up, figures it out, and all of a sudden they're stretching the field and putting up 20-plus points in this game. So as you hear me talk about this for both sides of the ball, obviously you can tell I don't think this is going to be a barn burner type of a showdown. which if you think about through like the 2010s, 2015s, when there were some Big 12 teams, it was like 55-49 and all these high-scoring games. I don't think we're going to get that today, this Saturday, because Texas hasn't shown us the ability to do that against FBS opponents, let alone ones as good defensively as the Sooners are. And even if John Mateer is back for Oklahoma, they're going to be incredibly patient and cautious with him to avoid furthering any potential harm, risk, aggravating the healed broken bone. Both of these teams are going to get in here and try and win this thing 10-6. They are. There's no way that they're going to look at how their teams have played football through the first 5 weeks and say, yeah, you know what, let's just chuck it around 45 times and try and win in a barn burner. Like, that is not what's going to happen this weekend. We've also hit the point of the season where you're going to start hearing me talk a lot about teams in desperation mode. Who needs to win the week more than the other opponent does? It is why, even though it was week 1, I felt like Auburn was going to beat Baylor, because I knew who Auburn had to face the next 6 weeks and how a loss at Baylor would probably have their head coach fired by this point in the season. They won that game. It's why I felt Texas A&M was going to go into Notre Dame and steal a road-ranked victory, because they needed to prove they had moved past that big hump, that big hurdle of not being able to do so over the last decade. It is why I picked Florida to get off the mat this past week against Texas, because they're too talented of a team to not stay competitive against every SEC opponent. Desperation games are not perfect. Penn State was in one against Oregon. They lost. LSU, I thought, was in one going to Ole Miss. They lost. But it's far more of an actual indicator than people want to give it credit for. And that's where we're at with this game. Texas has hit its desperation mode point of the season. Falling to 3-3 through 6 weeks of the season and being 0-3 to all of your Power 4 opponents is an unacceptable mark for this program, especially one that still has games at the end of the year against Georgia and Texas A&M. I do not think that we are going to leave this game being like, whoa, what was that from Texas? They put up 35 on Oklahoma's defense. They were running up and down. Arch played the best game of his career. I don't think that is going to be the case. But for whatever reason, it could be that Mateer doesn't make it back in time for this game. Or maybe he does, and he's not at the level that Oklahoma needs him to be at. Maybe he's playing at 75% of himself, and that's just enough for Texas to get by. Maybe Mateer comes back and he looks just as he did through the first 5 weeks, but the Texas defense somehow does enough to muddy this game up and contribute enough to a grimy, low-scoring win. Any of those things are possible to me, despite, instead of saying like Texas came and arrived and they are who they are and they're going to be great the rest of the regular season. Any of those 3 things could happen there. And I do think the Longhorns, one way or another, are going to pull out the win here because they cannot afford to lose this game. And the Sooners, who could chalk it up for a few different reasons. We rushed our quarterback too quick, or he couldn't make it back to game time. It's our first loss of the regular season. They can afford to lose this game. Give me Texas by a yucky final score of 16-10. And we will be making the under of 43.5 in this game, one of our best bets from the week. Give me Texas because they need it. And we'll leave this game saying, hey, Oklahoma did their best, but it was just Texas's day. They just needed it more, and the Longhorns can start to try and find something because it's a win here, and then they have 2 more games against lower level competition in the conference. I believe it's Kentucky. I believe Mississippi State is on there. They have a few weeks to try and figure out what this offense is going to be. I don't imagine this is going to be the game where they try something new. I think they're going to try out and squeak out a low-scoring game. Again, Texas here by a final score of 16-10.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
I want to take a second to let you guys know that just like if John Mateer decides to suit up and play against Texas, Iron Man, your boy here is going through a very similar thing. I bit the back of my gum right next to my wisdom tooth. It is making for some some painful commentary here today at the SpringBlake College Football Show. I'm doing my best. I want the same credit that John Mateer got when he goes out there Saturday. We tried our best. We powered through. I think it's going okay. I think I sound all right. No lisp, hopefully. But we move on. So we just previewed Texas, Oklahoma. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and we are going to roll out the Week 7 SpringBlake Sweet 16. If you are new to this show, I'm going to explain this a little bit one more time. If you are here for what would be possibly the 25th or 26th time, you understand what the SpringBlake Sweet 16 does. It does not reflect resumes or quality wins or who are the undefeated teams in college football. It values neutral field favorability, power ratings of who I think would be favored over the other if they were on a neutral field this weekend. So there's some teams that are ahead of teams that they've beaten, or some teams that are below teams that they've beaten, vice versa. It is just who I think right now are the 16 best teams in the sport. So we're going to go 1 to 16 real quick and then move it back into what I believe is going to be some game previews, if not a new segment that I'm really just not whiffing, but calling my shot on that it might work. Anywho, this is the Week 7 SpringBlake Sweet 16, my top 16 power-rated teams in the country. My top 3 stay the same from where they were last week. I've got Oregon as my number 1 team in the country, Alabama at number 2, Ohio State at number 3. My number 4 team has jumped up 4 spots from last week's power ratings, and that is the Miami Hurricane. The way in which that they have dismantled inferior opponents and hung around with great competition. They have been the most impressive team in the sport. They are up, I believe, almost a full 12 spots from where I had them in the preseason poll. Miami at number 4. Notre Dame jumps up 2 spots to number 5. I've got Georgia down a spot to number 6. Texas A&M is my 7th power-rated team in the country. They have gone up from, I think, 9 in the preseason, so they're up 2 spots overall from where they were. Texas A&M has showed me a lot the last few weeks, and I don't want to spoil the game preview that we're about to do between them and Florida, but Texas A&M has really rounded itself into a fully developed team. Love what we've seen from the run defense and the ground game the last couple of weeks. Texas moves down 2 spots to number 8. Texas obviously loses to Florida. Florida, I think, is one of the better rosters in this sport. I was so close to putting them in this week's power poll. They just missed out. I believe I had them at 17 or 18 when it was all said and done. Texas at number 8. Now up 7 spots. This is going to sound weird. At number 9, I've got Oklahoma. Oklahoma was a top 10 team for me all regular season. When Mateer got hurt, they got bumped down. The expectation is that Mateer is either back this week or next week. This ranking is assuming that he is back in at quarterback for the Sooners. So Oklahoma has always been a top 10 team, but because of the Mateer news, they are bumped back up in at number 9. Ole Miss is a team that I didn't have in my top 16 in the preseason. They were in that, 17 to 24 range. They are up to number 10 now. Continue to be amazed with what they've gotten offensively out of Trinidad Chambliss. The defense, while not being littered with talent necessarily, it's a lot of young players, a lot of turnover from last season, continues to improve, and really just one of the more impressive teams I've seen this year. Indiana is up a spot to number 11. Massive game for them heading to Eugene this upcoming weekend to take on the Oregon Ducks. So again, we've got a 1 versus 11 matchup this weekend. We'll preview that game on tomorrow, Friday's show. Really excited to see how that one unfolds. Up a spot to number 12, I've got Texas Tech. Texas Tech is unbelievable, man. And they have really done a good job combining talent on the roster with just a roster that was already good before those guys showed up. Like, it was a good competitive roster in the Big 12, and then they added starters at all major positions. They are, to me, the one team in the Big 12 that I look at and say, like, man, you could compete in the Big 10 or the SEC. You might not be the best in those conferences, but you wouldn't be the worst by any means. And I think it's really impressive what Texas Tech has done and how well everything is gelled despite there being so many new pieces. So they are my number 12 team. Tennessee's down a few spots to number 13. Tennessee, to me, was another team that wasn't in my top 16 heading into the year, but I've always just had them in that range of, like, if they can figure it all out at the same time, and by that I mean the ground game, which has been there, and can Joey Aguilar fit in? Can the defense be sturdy enough on a week-to-week basis? Tennessee has done a really nice job. I think I overinflated them a little bit too much. I've got them back down to 13. I feel like this is the right range for the Volunteers, so I've got them there. And then we've got 3 more teams to close out the SpringBlake Sweet 16, and this is what I call Tier 2 of the Big Ten. I've got USC at 14, Michigan at 15, down 12 spots from last week's power ratings. Penn State in as my number 16 rated team in the country. Just spend a little bit of time here real quick on these guys. USC and Michigan have flip-flopped each other every single week. I think those teams are incredibly neck and neck, despite being very different rosters and playing very different styles. But I've got them in that range. They've been there the entire season, I think, and they have a big game, which we'll preview on tomorrow's show as well. And then Penn State takes a bump down, from both of them. I can look at USC and Michigan and figure out what their identity is. They have talent to match it. Penn State has more talent, but not an identity, and they're not playing cohesive football right now. Still one of those situations where, like, Clemson, when I held on to them for a couple weeks in the top 16, it was like, well, they just have so much overwhelming talent. But then at a certain point, it was like, well, if you can't figure out your identity with that talent, you're not a top 16 team. That is where Penn State is right now. It's like, okay, you have 2 losses on the season, one of them disastrous, one of them I can understand. The roster talent is still good enough to be in the top 16, but they are on thin ice because the hungry Florida Gators are sitting right behind them. That is the Week 7 SpringBlake Sweet 16, my top 16 power-rated teams in the country. We're going to take another break. We're going to keep moving along this show.
My name's Blake.
All right, so as I said, we're going to try a new segment here, and basically what this means is I'm recording during lunchtime, and when I do that, I think it'd be fun to just call people at random, some of my favorite people in the world, and not explain anything to them. Maybe explain a little bit to them why I'm calling them in the middle of a weekday, and then just have them pick names for who's going to win games this week. Some games we've discussed, some games that we'll discuss between the end of this show and tomorrow, but we're going to start it off with a very special guest. And this will be another thing, too. We're going to figure out who loves me enough to pick up the phone when I call. So we're going to start this off. I'm going to give a phone call to a very important person, one I'll have introduce herself in just a second, and we'll see how this show works. Hi, you are on as the first live guest of the SpringBlake College Football Show. Who am I speaking with?
Oh.
Can you state your name, please?
Is this legit?
This is legit. I'm staring at this camera right now. You are on as the first ever guest of the SpringBlake College Football Show. I'm hoping that your sound is being picked up enough. Can you state for the people who this is?
Jessica.
And what is your relationship to me, Jessica?
Friend.
Oh, that's good. You're off to a good start. Yeah, this is my friend Jessica. She's just my friend. No, I like that. Okay, cool. So we're doing a segment here where if I'm recording during shows, I'm just going to call and have my friends pick games. I don't need you to tell me any breakdowns or anything, but I'm just going to list 2 teams and I'm going to have you pick one of them. Does that sound good, my dear friend Jessica?
Yes, that sounds great.
Okay, awesome. So the first one that we're going to have you pick here, we've got Texas or Oklahoma. Oklahoma. Okay, all right. So we've already gone on the opposite side of that one. Next game. I haven't broken this one down yet, so I'm not going to give away my pick, but you've got to choose between Alabama or Missouri. Alabama. All right. Ball knower. All right, let's do a couple more. We're going to do this next one here. You have to pick between Texas A&M or Florida.
Ooh.
Tough one.
I'm going to say Florida.
Florida. All right, going with the Florida Gators. Upset win on the road. That'll be a massive outcome. 3 more games for you if you've got time for us, my friend Jessica. Let's go USC, which is out in California. I know you're a West Coast girl. USC or Michigan?
Michigan.
Michigan, all right, going on the road, getting a nice big win there in the Big Ten. Two more games, Indiana or Oregon.
I'm gonna say Oregon.
Oregon, good pick. Oregon's one of the best teams in the country. You're doing right there. Final game, Georgia or Auburn.
Oh, I'm gonna say Auburn.
Auburn, wow, really big outcome there for them. Now they are the home team, so I feel good about that one. All right, those are the 6 games I wanted to break down. Are there any other things or comments you'd like to make to the lovely followers of this show?
No, I don't think so.
All right, well, you heard it. Well,
Thanks for having me, sweet boyfriend.
Oh, boyfriend. She wanted to put it out there. Yes, I am not just a friend. That is my lovely lady, Jessica. Jess, I'm going to say that I'm hanging up here so that way I can find a nice entry or end point for this conversation when I go back and edit it. Don't hang up on me when I say this. Thank you so much for joining the SpringBlake College Football Show. We are going to put your picks online. We're going to try and call people weekly and see how they do. You were the first to do this. So hopefully you set a good intro to this segment, and we'll start calling more people in the next following weeks. But thank you for your time, and we will hopefully get some good wins here for you. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Blake.
What?
All right. I think that went well. I'm not going to know until I go back and take a look at the audio and listen back to make sure that you could hear her, but that's a new segment. If I record at lunch, we're just going to call random people that mean a lot to me and see if they can pick up and pick some winners for us. So those were Jess's 6 picks for the upcoming college football slate. So what? We've done that. We've done the SpringBlake Sweet 16. We've previewed the Red River Shootout. Let's go to 2 more games to close this one out. I am really looking forward to seeing how Alabama responds to its 3rd straight tough conference game. This time heading over to Columbia, Missouri for a date with the red-hot and still disrespected Missouri Tigers. Now, I have to put my hand up for playing a role in Missouri being slightly disrespected. We have barely talked about the Tigers at all on this show, outside of some quick glances in the preseason and maybe betting on or against them this year. We really haven't talked about what they've done. So let's just do a quick little history lesson on Missouri so far in this 2025 season. They are the number 1 rushing team in the country, 310 yards per game. That is 30 yards above the number 2 team in the nation. I believe it's either Navy, one of the armed forces, but there's a 30-yard gap between 1 and 2. Missouri up there, 310 yards on the ground per game. Ahmad Hardy has been the best running back in college football. He has 730 yards. And then their quarterback, Bo Pribula, who transferred in from Penn State this past offseason, has added in 121 yards on the ground, which is always a misleading number because they count sacks as rushing yards in this sport, and it drives me fucking insane. But he has 121 recorded rushing yards with 3 touchdowns. That ground game, that potency between the tackles has allowed Pribula to be very efficient through the air. He's completing 76% of his passes, which is the 4th best number in this sport, for 1,200 yards to go with 9 scores and just 3 interceptions. So it's a dominant ground game, efficient passing offense, and then defensively, they've been just as good. They have the best defense in the country in yards per game at 198. They are a top 20 scoring defense at 16.8 points per game. They have the 2nd best run defense in the country, allowing just 2 yards per carry, and have the 16th best sack rate at 9.02%. So now that we have that quick history lesson, here's the context. They have played Central Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana, and not LSU, the Ragin' Cajuns of Louisiana, South Carolina, and UMass. 3 nobodies, and then 2 Power 4 teams that have some of the worst defenses and offensive lines in the country. Important context. So that's what Missouri has been this year, and as you can tell why I probably haven't given them the credit that they probably say they deserve based on the stat sheets. So now comes in Alabama, giving Mizzou its first big game of the season. And you could argue Kansas-Mizzou is a big game because it's the reignition of a rivalry that they've been wanting forever. I think the border war, the first time it was played in over 10 years. But Alabama is the first the first big game of the season. And Mizzou, the last couple of years, has been a team that has let down in these spots when it comes to the first big, hey, prove it moment of the season. Last year, this team started 3-0, a lot of impressive wins, and then, they welcome in Texas A&M, nationally televised game. They lose 41-10. By the way, that game, if you've been a ball knower with me since day one, and I mean day one before this show, the Connor Wegman hype train had never looked better than in that game. I was circling and circling and circling. I was like, told you guys Wegman's the dude. He looked so good in that game. Really what it was, Missouri wasn't what we thought they were through the first 3 weeks. They got their doors blown off 41-10. It was not just last year. In 2023, Missouri off to a 5-0 start, and everybody says the same story. Their SEC schedule isn't that bad. Is Missouri a threat for the playoffs or a threat for the SEC? They host LSU in a nationally televised game. Their defense is horrendous in that one to a very good LSU offense. They lose that game 49-39. So this is a Mizzou team that has done this a few years in a row. They beat up and they look good the first few weeks, and when it comes time to hey, let's see something, they don't show us anything. And now they're also getting an Alabama team that I believe has potentially figured out its biggest defensive issue, the one that has haunted them under the Kalen DeBoer era, and the one that should have been Missouri's biggest advantage heading into this game. Now, I don't want to sit here and say that everything's been solved after one performance, but the way that Alabama handled Vanderbilt's ground game and the mobile quarterback was unlike anything we had seen under Kalen DeBoer, and I believe his name is Sam Womack, the defensive coordinator, since they took over at the start of 2024. Diego Pavia had 12 carries for 58 yards in that game. And you're like, hey, 58 yards out of the quarterback, not the worst thing in the world. But if you take out the one chunk play he had, it's actually 11 carries for 22 yards. The running back, Cedric Alexander, finished the day with 76 yards, had a breakaway touchdown score. If you take away that breakdown touchdown score, he had 3 carries for just 11 yards. Alabama in that game forced Vanderbilt to completely abandon their identity. The one thing that had gotten them to that point, to this turn success for the Commodores, everything that they had won by for a year and a half, they had to abandon because Alabama told them, you're just not going to be able to do it against us. Vanderbilt didn't register a carry, a rush attempt in the fourth quarter of that game. That is never going to be a style where Vanderbilt is winning games because of that, and the same can be said for Missouri. If Missouri is not able to run a balanced offense in the third and fourth quarters, that means that this game is going to be all Alabama. Now, unlike Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia, I think if Bo Pribula needs to do more through the air, he probably can to more success than Vanderbilt did last week. But we've also yet to see him thrown into a situation like this. And they had a high-scoring game against Kansas, but it was still the Ahmad Hardy show and Bo picking his spots when he needed to. If this Missouri offense cannot commit to the run game late in the game, they're going to have to play a totally foreign style of football that they've been comfortable with all season. And I just really don't like how that game plays out for them. There's also a really interesting mark about Missouri's offense, and I guess Alabama's defense too, that we need to talk about heading into this game. Missouri has been terrific at converting in the red zone. They've hit on 96% of opportunities, but a lot of those have been field goals. The touchdown number is drastically lower, still sitting at 74%, which is good, but not nearly as great. Alabama all year has been the perfect bend, don't break defense, holding defenses to a red zone scoring rate of 66.67%, which is the 6th best mark in the sport. Missouri might be able to have a field day marching in between the 20s, but if Alabama holds them to field goals or even missed field goals or turnovers like it was in the Vanderbilt game, Missouri might have a really tough time keeping pace with the Alabama offense, because I also think if there is one part of Missouri's success this season that is a little bit more fraudulent than the others, it's their defense. As I said, we watched Kansas march up and down on them behind the terrific play of Jalen Daniels and a really creative offense. And then we also watched Lenoris Sellers have his best game of the year and torch them through the air despite not having much of anything around him to work with. This is the first time Mizzou is going to be faced against a potent offense that is matched an elite passing game with a sturdy ground game. Because we said, Jam Miller went over 100 yards for the first time a running back has done that under Kalen DeBoer. This offense is steadily improving each week. It is going to be far and away the best attack Missouri's defense is going to be faced with all season, and I really don't think that there's much they're going to be able to do to stop it. I don't want this. I'm doing this preview, and I'm hearing this in my head in the way I sound. I don't want this to sound like it's going to be Alabama by 50, that they're going to blow the doors off of them just like A&M did the season prior. But when I look at these two teams, I see very different things. On one side, I see one of the best rosters in this sport from top to bottom, one that has shown me tangible growth every single week. And when it has played really tough opponents, and there's been two of them, they've looked dominant during big stretches of both of those games. They looked dominant in the first half against Georgia, and at Vanderbilt in the second half, they looked dominant. And then on the other side, I have a team that has looked great all season. There is no denying how good the Tigers have looked, but they have done so against three nobodies in the sport and two very flawed and flimsy Power 4 programs. The stat sheets, the websites, everything that has been recorded on paper so far this season tells me that Missouri is the better team. These eyeballs and common sense confidently tell me that Alabama is the better team here. I think Mizzou will get some points on the board early, kind of like Vandy did. Maybe it's a couple of chunk plays from Ahmad Hardy, or Bo hits a nice run on a read option or a play action play, scramble drill. But for the span of 4 quarters, I'm going to take the Tide to pull out a nice win here by the final score of 31-23. So again, this isn't me saying Alabama by 50. I'm just saying I see two very different teams here. One that on the stat sheet looks awesome. And then one that I watch and I say, no, that's an awesome team. We're going to take them to win by 8 here, and we are adding Alabama as a best bet this weekend. We're going to buy the hook down to -3 to avoid any fuckery in the action there. But I do believe the Tide -3, it should be a best bet of the week because I think they are, on the field, a much better team than Missouri. So that is my breakdown of that game. We've got one more to do today. We're going to take one final quick water break and be back and finish up this show with Texas A&M and Florida.
You want to go to war, Balaki?
Uh-oh, Aggies. Those crazy little Florida Gators are coming into town. Huge game here Saturday night between two awesome, and yes, I said two awesome SEC football teams. The story with this game between Texas A&M and Florida is being able to recognize what these teams currently are and not just attach ourselves to what they were a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago. Both teams are vastly different. For the Aggies, it's been the development of its trench play. This team already had things locked up through the air, both defensively, offensively, where you're like, man, these guys on the perimeter are legit. But they were prone to getting gashed on the ground or not being able to gash opposing defenses themselves between the tackles. Well, both of those things have changed, especially since conference play had started. The last 2 games, Texas A&M has run the ball for 207 yards and 299 yards, and they held good rushing offenses from Auburn and Mississippi State to a combined 129 yards after allowing 139 yards per game the first 3 weeks. That is such a massive development for the Aggies. They no longer need to live and die by the volatile, explosive passing game. Marcel Reed does not have to complete above 60% of his passes, something that he struggled with at times this season. He doesn't need to be the most efficient quarterback in the world if they're going to be able to lean on Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens for, the third and fourth quarters of games to hold on to leads. It makes A&M such a better, well-rounded team. So that's what's going on for A&M. And for Florida, It has been just one game, but what a game it was. Their ability to stretch the field because of the return of Dallas Wilson changed everything for this offense. Defenses now have to be honest on both phases of the ball and cannot just sell out on the run, which means it's easier for Jaden Baugh to be the killer he is. It was a high volume game for him. I think, was it 27 carries? Like, they were like, Jaden Baugh, you know what? We can hit a little bit through the air, so we're going to let you really work between the tackles. He was fantastic. The other talented wideouts now have easier assignments because of Wilson's ability to, work with the number one corner. Easier for them to make plays when called upon. And when you have all of that playing, and that's, better run support, better play from the offensive line because they're not being sold out, up by front sevens, and the wide receivers have a better time. DJ Lagway can actually take a deep breath and play confidently. He looked so different against Texas than he did in those losses to Miami and LSU. Looked very much like the quarterback we have all expected him to be. When you trust everything around you, you're going to be able to trust both your eyes and your arms even more. And we got that last week as he completed 75% of his passes, 300 yards, and 2 scores against what I've still said throughout this entire week is a great Texas defense. So, that's what you've got going on for both of those teams and what's changed for them the last few weeks. Another storyline that is important to recognize in this game. I am very curious to see if penalties end up making a difference on a couple of pivotal plays or even swaying the outcome of this game. Texas A&M, as great as they've been, as much as I love them, they have been one of the most penalized teams since Mike Elko took over as head coach at the beginning of last season. They were one of the worst teams in the country. They are not much better now in 2025. They currently rank 122nd in penalty yardage per game and 133rd in total penalties per game. Now, it hasn't stung them yet. They're undefeated. Well, that's because a lot of their opponents have been just as bad. Auburn ranks 129th in penalties per game. Mississippi State, 115th in penalties per game. Utah State, 106th in penalties per game. UTSA, 90th in penalties per game. Florida hasn't necessarily been lights out in this category, but they have been better than all of those teams and are closer to a top 60 team over their last 3 games. I'm just saying that this Florida team is too talented to let things for Texas A&M to allow things to get murky in the penalty battle. It was fine with UTSA and Utah State and even Mississippi State to some degree because all those teams are not nearly as good. And even Auburn to a certain extent, but Auburn is as bad, if not worse than you in those categories. Florida is a different cat, man. And it wouldn't surprise me if it ends up swinging key moments or the outcome of this game. So let's land the plane on it. A&M right now, 7.5-point favorites. That line is shrinking. My favorite thing to do in this sport right now is to wake up Sunday, take a look at Florida's spread, and just bet it. Because every week it shrinks by 2 or 3 points. This one, even yesterday, was at 8.5. Over-under is set at 47.5. In the preseason, before the season started, I thought of both of these teams as some of the most underrated and talented teams in the country. Texas A&M was my preseason number 9 team in the nation. Florida was my number 10 team in the nation. Both looked flawed in the first few weeks. Florida crumbled to the point that they obviously did, while A&M stacked an impressive resume as they continue to develop as a team, and very recently, the Gators have started to resemble the team I expected them to be. I think we are in for an awesome game here between two teams that are far closer in talent than people want to give it credit for. And because you hear me say that, you obviously are going to understand that I love the line in this game. I think getting Florida above a touchdown here is awesome value. Anything above a touchdown. If it shrinks a little bit lower, anything could happen. I think this is a one-possession game here between these two teams. And I definitely can see a world where A&M squeaks out a close, hard-fought win. However, desperation mode is going to pop up for the second time this week. I'm going to push the button here on this preview show, and I'm going to take the Gators to pull off the second straight upset, which would make for one of the more impressive stretches of play we've seen this season. As bad as everything looked against LSU, Miami, USF, if you want to tie that one in, if Florida responds after its bye week with a home win over Texas and a road win against Texas A&M, that is one of the more impressive things a team will have done this entire season. I'm going to pick it to happen. You guys shouldn't be surprised if you've been here on this show for a long time. I have so much belief in this team. I think from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, they continue to develop in such a way that makes them, some teams come out in week one and just are who they are. That happens a lot of the time. Ohio State was dominant in week one. They look better since then, but they've just been dominant from the get-go. A lot of coaches and a lot of teams need to figure out who they are. I think Florida has done that. I think last week was the introduction. I think this is the sequel. And I think we're on for a really interesting story here and a case study with the Florida Gators. I'm going to take them to take down the Aggies on the road by a final score of 28-27. And yes, Florida plus 7.5 is going to be a best bet this week. So I've given out 3 in 3 of these game previews. That is, again, Texas, Oklahoma under 43.5. Alabama, we're going to buy down to -3. And we're going to take Florida plus 7.5. I like their odds to even pull off the win. So that is the first half of our game preview show. The next one will be released Friday, hopefully early morning. So we're going to get 2 episodes here in a 12-hour span? No, 16-hour span? I don't know what it's going to be, but we've got a lot to cover. Thank you guys for tuning into this show, supporting this show. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channels. That's both YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Follow the socials at SpringBlake CFB. Thank you to Jessica for being the first guest of the SpringBlake College Football Show. We'll try that again next week. See if we can bring someone else into this crazy little idea that I've had. And we'll keep on keeping on. I love you. I appreciate you. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace.